Okay, everyone, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. We have close to 70 participants logged in and a few more coming online. We expect more to come on this evening, but I'm Lee McDonald, Director of Counseling, Health, and Wellness for the district. I'd like to welcome you to our continued Coping with COVID series. This evening's presentation is obviously focused on internet gaming disorders and just gaming addiction in general. A couple just housekeeping items. Number one, we are recording this conversation. This presentation, we'll make sure it gets up on the district website on our YouTube channel. I'll also make sure that it gets tweeted out at WWP Counseling so that you can watch it over and over again or share it with friends and colleagues as it relates to their personal challenges. So before we get started, I introduce our panelists this evening. Obviously, this is a topic I think that's really surfaced, especially now during the COVID-19 pandemic, when you think about isolation and quarantine and people being stuck probably indoors more so than they would like. I can tell you personally that I have a sixth grade son. He loves video games, so I have the same challenges probably that some of you do in terms of finding that balance. And was sharing with my colleagues earlier that I do play with him from time to time. And so, video gaming is not always a bad thing, right? It can be a good break from everyday life and stressors and whatnot. So, but I know that our presenters are going to talk a little bit more about that and that finding that balance and hopefully give you some suggestions for anything that you might be struggling with as it relates to your son or daughter. Tonight, I am joined by Abigail Leverett. She is a UBHC clinician at Grover Middle School, and also Mary Kate Hardy, also one of our UBHC clinicians housed at High School South. If you're not familiar, we entered into a partnership with Rutgers University Behavioral Health 3 years ago. They are mental health. We have 4 on-site mental health clinicians that support us in a variety of ways, support our students, our families, whether that's crisis management, professional development for our staff, parent programming such as this, navigating mental health challenges. So we're very fortunate to have them as a resource. So with that said, I want to go ahead and turn it over to them, and we'll take some questions at the end. We'll keep the chat running and try to answer questions as we go, but stick around. I think you're in for a real treat of a great presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. So as Dr. McDonald said, I am Mary Kate Hardy. The kids call me MK. I am the UBHC clinician at High School South. I'm joined by Abigail Leverett. She is going to be helping me with this presentation. Abby is going to be monitoring questions during the presentation. So if you have a question about the material as we go, you can write it in the chat. We're going to try to answer as we go. If Abby does not bring up your question, it's probably because it's going to be answered shortly in the presentation. So anything that we don't get to during, we will get to at the end of the presentation. And if anyone can hear my dogs barking in the other room, it is because my husband is supposed to wrangle them, but he's playing a video game right now. So it's very topical for this presentation. Okay, so aside from working at High School South, I am a therapist. I also work in private practice as well, and I have really a passion for treating excessive gaming, or what can sometimes be classified as video game addiction. So before we start the presentation, I want to let everyone know, and if you were here a little early, you heard us chatting about video games. So the presentation is not necessarily about like, this is how you stop kids from playing, because there are a lot of benefits to it as well. I come from a place of actually really enjoying video games myself, but there is a balance that needs to be struck. And so the presentation is really to help us kind of see when it's getting too much, and to kind of understand a little bit more about the culture of what kids are getting out of it and things like that. Okay, so let's start. All right, so the presentation also was originally written for other therapists. So there are some clinical terms on here that I will explain as we go. So with slide 1, so internet gaming disorder is defined by the DSM-5, which the DSM-5 is what clinicians and psychologists and psychiatrists use to diagnose people with actual mental health disorders. So it's defined by the DSM-5 as repetitive use of internet-based games, often with other players, that lead to significant issues with functioning. I personally don't like the way this is worded because it's not just internet-based games, that's just the way that they worded it. We'll see in another slide, there's another source that words it a little bit better, in my opinion, but it doesn't have to be connected to the internet. They mean all video games. So 5 of the following criteria must be met within 1 year to qualify for this diagnosis. Preoccupation or obsession with internet games, withdrawal when not playing games, a buildup of tolerance, meaning more time needed to be spent playing the games to get the same effects. And we'll go over some of those effects later in the presentation. The person has tried to stop or curb their playing but has failed to do so. The person has had a loss of interest in other life activities or hobbies, meaning that they have lost interest in things they were previously interested in. So if your child has never enjoyed school and they suddenly are not interested in school, this is more gearing towards they might have really enjoyed art and now they're not drawing anymore. Person has continued overuse of gaming, even with the knowledge of how it's impacting them. Person has lied to others about their game usage. Person uses games to relieve anxiety or a way to escape. Person has lost or put at risk an opportunity or relationship because of gaming. Hazardous gaming disorders. So the World Health Organization defines, it's the same thing, it's just a slightly different definition from a different organization. So it's defined as a pattern of gaming behavior, digital or video gaming, characterized by impaired control over gaming, increasing priority given to gaming over other activities to the extent that gaming takes precedence over the other interests and daily activities, and continuation or escalation of gaming despite the occurrence of negative consequences. So the decision to include this by the World Health Organization came after consulting 66 professionals in 25 different countries. So what that is saying is that prior to really like a year or two ago, it wasn't even considered that video game addiction can be a thing because it's just so new. And so it's still, you know, in the DSM-5, which I mentioned in the other slide, it's still considered like a pending diagnosis to be officially added because they need more information on how it affects people long term. So this is something that is relatively new. Although video games themselves are not necessarily new, the way they've evolved has led to evolving patterns of play. So I have a few slides that go over different types of games, and I like to kind of mention a few highlights. A lot of the games I mentioned are played by older kids. So, if you have elementary school kids, they might not be playing the next few games I mentioned. So mobile online battle arena games, there's a game called League of Legends. And I include this on here because I think it's important to see how popular this game is. So it has 100 million players per month. There are, I think ESPN, there are actual tournaments where people play and make millions of dollars from playing it. It's also considered to have one of the most toxic communities of any video game. The reason for that is because when you play this game, you are ranked publicly. So if I played a match in this game, I can then see how I rank against everyone else in the world that plays this game. So I would immediately see how terrible I was compared to everybody else. And it's also a game where you join matches. They put you in randomly, and you can pick which character you want to play. You pick a top 3, and you might not necessarily get the character you want. So if someone is trying to go for like a top ranked spot, which most people that play this are doing it, trying to be competitive with it, and they are not getting the position they want or the character they want, they will sometimes purposely tank the entire team, which will tank everyone's ranking. And so it ends up being a very toxic environment. I have in parentheses here the name Tyler because to remind me that there was a famous case of this game for the first person that got banned for life. He made like 30 different accounts and was, told that he cannot be rehabilitated by the community because he was so, if if he was losing, he would make sure that everyone's rank suffered and would get very, aggressive in chat and things like that. So this game in particular is taking steps in the right direction. They're hiring psychologists in order to try to make the community less toxic, but inherently games that are that competitive come with that kind of atmosphere. Massive multiplayer online role-playing games like World of Warcraft, which you might have heard about. I like to highlight World of Warcraft, even though it's an older game, it's still a game that a lot of people play, and it is still ever evolving. But there actually have been a lot of high-profile deaths associated with playing this game. So 24-year-old Wu Tai from Shanghai is a case of someone that was playing this game in an internet cafe for about, I believe, 14 to 15 hours. And then while he was playing, he actually, started bleeding from his nose and his ears. And obviously the game did not cause him to do that. He had some kind of underlying health issue happening. However, the reason why this is so prominent is because there's footage online, which I would not recommend looking up. But there are people that try to stop him from playing. The ambulance comes and people try to save his life and he will not stop playing and ended up passing away. There's also Rebecca Christie from New Mexico, who is currently serving jail time for, neglecting her children, and actually her children ended up starving and passing away because she wouldn't stop playing this game. There's an HBO documentary called Love Child about people playing this game that have just neglected children, family members, themselves, and deaths associated with this game. So this kind of game is extremely addicting, and I'll go into that a little bit more later. Open world role-playing games, games like Skyrim, The Witcher, the game my husband is currently actually playing in the basement below my office right now, which is serving as the background noise for me, which is called God of War. If The Witcher sounds familiar to you and you're not a video game person, it might be because Netflix created a show based on it, which I believe got very good reviews. And so I actually think that's amazing that they can there's so much content in this game that they're creating like an entire show around the mythology. First-person shooters, Call of Duty, Halo, things like that. No information about that. And mobile games, which are games that people play when they don't even really like video games that much. So Angry Birds, Clash of Clans, Candy Crush, which I personally, when the pandemic started, re-downloaded Candy Crush, and I had a lot of issues not playing Candy Crush, even though I knew I was having issues not playing it, but it's just so mindless that it was really, giving me a lot of anxiety relief to just be like, let me just match these candies up, watch them explode, and feel good about myself for being able to do this while dealing with pandemic anxiety. So these games use specific tactics to get people that don't even really like video games engaged, which we'll go into a little bit more later. But it's bright colors, it's good job, and like lights and everything, and it's just it's easy to play and it makes you feel good while you're playing it. I have since uninstalled Candy Crush because I cannot be responsible with it. So I will go back to that other slide in a minute. The two slides were out of order. So here's a little clip from a show called Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which is an excellent show if anyone's ever watched it. But it's funny, but it's a really good way of showing specifically like when you're addicted to mobile gaming. So we will watch this. Abby, if you can't hear it or anyone can't hear it, just let me know when I start playing it, okay?
Gina, the DA needs copies of our interrogation transcripts from the Adams case. Gina? Gina? Gina?
Sorry, I was playing Crazy Cupcakes.
Crazy Cupcakes?
Crazy with a W, a backwards W.
No such thing as a backwards W.
Yeah, there is. See? Okay, how you play, you just line up 3 cupcakes with the same color frosting. Kaboom.
And this little game of yours, it's more interesting to you than your work?
Yeah, Crazy Cupcakes is a lot more interesting than this.
Stop playing crazy. And stop playing this inane garbage. It's embarrassing.
Say it to my face.
I did. You were looking at your phone.
Oh, cool, my bad. One hot pile of boring coming in.
Thank you, Gina. Dismissed. You're dismissed.
What you doing in here? Okay, cool. Can I just see your phone?
I may have been playing Crazy Cupcakes.
Okay, Captain, I think we're past the point of you being too proud to say the W.
Fine. I might have been playing Crazy Cupcakes.
It's so addictive, right? I play so much that when I close my eyes at night, I just see cupcakes now instead of my normal dizzying array of flashing lights.
Yes. Well, I have a tremendous amount of self-control. I don't think I'll have any problem resisting this silly game.
Mhm.
As a matter of fact, I've deleted the application there. Does this mean I've lost my progress? Well, it doesn't matter because I'm done.
Holt? Have you seen Captain Holt? Tall, handsome gentleman dressed like an airline pilot.
No.
Cancer wrap-up coming in. Captain, think you might have a little bit of a problem here, Bill.
I have this under control. You should leave. This is a men's room.
This is no longer a men's room. It is now a liar's den.
I am captain of this precinct, and you are my assistant. I have given you a direct order to leave. I do not have a problem. If I want to play Crazy Cupcakes, I will play Crazy Cupcakes. Crazy is a difficult word to say in anger, but I think I've made my feelings clear.
Captain. Captain. Captain.
Sorry. I'm just about to enter Sprinkle City. They break the game into these idiotic worlds to give you some false sense of progress.
So just stop playing.
But I'm just about to enter Sprinkle City. Gina, I got a problem. This game is starting to affect my work. Numbers 3 and 4 switch places. Cupcake match. I don't understand why I can't stop. I've never had a problem controlling myself. Do you know I love milk?
No.
Well, I do, but it hurts my stomach. So I haven't had milk, a beverage I love, for 19 years. 19 milkless years I've gone. But for some reason, I can't quit Crazy Cupcakes.
I know what to do.
Okay, so let me resume presenting. Oh no, back at the beginning. So I love that video no matter how many times I see it. It's a hysterical show. He ends up being able to quit because he sees someone that, you know, he really doesn't like, obsessed with the game, which is not necessarily how it works in real life. I mean, that was a parody actually of Candy Crush, but you can actually download that game now, Crazy Cupcakes, based on that episode. So I'm going back a slide. So I wanted to talk about video games and streaming because this is something that has become huge in recent years, especially with kids. So streaming is the act of playing a game live on the internet while people watch you, also known as Let's Plays. The medium people use to stream is typically YouTube or Twitch or Discord. So if you've heard people, you know, discuss kids discussing watching Twitch and stuff like that, they're literally watching other people play a video game. Anyone can stream, but popular streamers make significant money based on their viewer count. Streamers are influential in the video game industry and can directly impact the popularity of games. So I put Among Us in parentheses. If you have kids, I'm sure you have heard of Among Us. A lot of people, you know, it's a mobile game that you can play, and it's very, very popular right now. And a lot of people think that the game came out this year, but Among Us has actually been out for a few years now. But when it initially came out, it wasn't a very popular game. And then one popular Twitch streamer tried it, and now it has exploded in popularity. And I believe tied with Animal Crossing as the most popular video game of this year. But so they directly impact the popularity of certain games. So millions of people will just watch them play in real time, and just, it's a lot of kids like it as if watching a TV show, because the streamers might have good personalities. There's also chats so they can like interact with each other while watching people stream. And a lot of kids, can't afford the game, aren't allowed to play a game. A game is too difficult for them, so they can watch someone else go through it. The allure of streaming comes from the sense of community, as well as the ability to watch talented and entertaining gamers. All right, so what makes these games so addicting? So there's the admiration for prowess, so playing against other people, or games like the game I mentioned earlier where you can see yourself ranked online. It helps people that might not feel like they're good at other areas of their life feel very accomplished and talented in this area. There's the role-playing aspect, endless play in real time. So video games are not like games that we used to play years ago, like Pac-Man and Galaga. So they are now, a lot of games are in real time and are endless. And so by real time, what I mean is like, if you're playing a match in Fortnite, you can't just stop a match. You can't pause the game. A lot of games can't pause anymore because you're playing with other people and you're playing in real time. And by endless play, there are certain games like I mentioned before, called open world games, where the game doesn't end. The video game my husband's currently playing right now, it's called God of War. And I went downstairs before the presentation started and I was like, this game is really long. And he's like, oh no, I beat the game. I'm just still doing the other stuff in the game because it's an open world. The concept is you can keep doing stuff forever. So if you like the character, like the items you have and stuff, there are side things you can do really forever. Peer-driven, pressure to play, time-intensive, challenging, stimulating, interesting storyline, graphics, and music. I will sometimes just watch certain games that my husband plays because they look like movies nowadays, certain games. And daily rewards and operant conditioning. So I have one more video that we're going to watch that kind of, I think, does a really good job of explaining the psychological tactics that certain games use to get people to continue to play. So let me bring that up. Yes, so the presentation is being recorded. The presentation, the slides will also be up, but I would encourage you to watch it because a lot of the slides don't necessarily explain kind of the concepts we're talking about. Okay, so we're not going to watch this entire video. We're going to watch it about halfway through.
In the early 1930s, a man named Burrhus Frederick Skinner began to study psychology in a radical new way. See, before him, we only knew how to condition reactions. We could condition a person to be terrified of pumpkins or hungry at the sight of office supplies. But Skinner theorized that you could go one further. He theorized that you could condition volition, that you could change the way that people made choices. So why are we talking about it? Because a vast number of today's games are built upon Skinner's discoveries, and it's starting to become a bad habit. But before I get ahead of myself, let's take a closer look at what Skinner did. Skinner created a machine, a simple box with a button in it, that he would put pigeons in. When the pigeons pecked at the button, the machine would give them food. He then hooked the box up to a recording device so he could tell how often the pigeons pecked the button. Seems simple enough, so why was this so groundbreaking? Because pecking the button is active. This wasn't just an automatic reaction to stimuli, it involved making a decision. So if Skinner could show that he could consistently change how often the pigeons pecked the button, he could show that he could condition them to make a specific choice. This is called operant conditioning. Now, there were two amazing parts to his findings. 1, operant conditioning works on humans. 2, simply rewarding someone every time they do an action isn't the best way to keep them continually doing that action. Rather, if you provide a reward to a person after they perform the action a random number of times, or only give a reward once every so many minutes, these methods are far more effective at conditioning someone to repeat an action. Skinner often talked about operant conditioning in terms of gambling. Most gambling games are not rigged in the gambler's favor, and oddly enough, most gamblers are well aware of this. And yet they continue to gamble rather than perform an equally strenuous job that has a regular payout with a higher net profit. Consider which activity people will tell you is more fun. Spending 8 hours in a casino playing the slots and ending up with $100, or pushing a button in a factory for 8 hours and getting a paycheck for $100 at the end. This is all compounded by another discovery of Skinner's research. He demonstrated that primary conditioners, or rewards that are fundamental biological needs, food, water, sex, etc., have a diminishing effect once the person reaches satiation or the biological limit of their needs. But then there are secondary reinforcers, things outside the biological realm, like money or social approbation. These things generally don't hit a satiation point. You can probably see where we're going with this. Many of you have played Farmville or World of Warcraft well past the point where it was fun. Why? Because those games are very clearly built around reward schedules. The entire design of both of those games is to condition you to continue to repeat an action that has long since lost its novelty, that has long since become tedious. Actually, before we continue, quick disclaimer. Being conditioned to do an action and being addicted to something are very different. We're not going to go into the addiction thing today, but I just wanted to acknowledge the difference. All we're going to talk about today is how games can condition us. Okay, disclaimer over. So why is it a problem if games do this? For now, let's ignore the questionable morality of using Skinner's theories to create games. The problem is that it's a lazy and cheap way to get someone to believe they're enjoying your product. Have you ever finished a game and then looked back a few weeks later and thought, what the hell was I doing putting 80 hours of my life into that? That usually happens because the game used Skinner's techniques to create the illusion of engagement and extend playtime. RPGs, especially poorly made ones, are a great example of this. Everything from loot drops to leveling is a very clear reward schedule that reinforces the behavior that gets you the reward. Ever been playing late and getting sleepy, but then decide that you're going to get just one more level before you go to bed? Yep. But this isn't just an RPG problem. It's endemic. Almost anything with points uses this system. Ask your grandmother sometime why she plays so much Bejeweled. But it goes beyond points, too. It works with anything that has a clear and manifest reward. Solitaire, the most played game in the world, sets up the infrequent win as a clear reward. Many action games use the same system to convince players to mash the same buttons for 12 hours straight. Even elements like the voiceovers in shooters that tell the player how awesome they are can be used as conditioning tools. It's also one of the main reasons every game is getting RPG elements these days. Now, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with adding RPG elements if it's being used to create deep...
Okay, so present. Oh gosh. So that video does a really great job of explaining the techniques, the actual psychological techniques that games employ to get people to continue playing. So a lot of times it is not actually, it's not really that feasible that someone can stop playing completely on their own because they don't realize that this is happening. So if you think about someone that maybe is having, issues in their life or stress, as we all are during this pandemic, and then they have a game that is telling them, you're doing amazing, you're great. It really gives them a boost of self-esteem and it sets up tasks that are able to be complete. In our everyday life, we can't solve a problem just by playing the right sequence of buttons, but it helps us feel like we accomplished something, kind of the same way that, like, if people are very overwhelmed, they might go and do their laundry because they're like, all right, I can't control everything else in my life, but I can do my laundry and put it away, and I can control that one thing. That's what a lot of kids are getting out of video games subconsciously. Okay, so rewarding aspects of gaming. So there's the intermittent reinforcement that was spoken about in the video we just watched. Because as I said, if you got the same reinforcement every time, or if you were told you're amazing every 5 minutes, it will wear off. But psychologically, if you have to work for it in the game, it means more. Social reinforcement, competition, cooperation, social standing, friendships, community, especially during COVID, which I will touch on a little bit later, but there is so much social reinforcement. It is genuine communities that people have. There can be sexual or romantic stimulation, fantasy persona. So you can be anyone in certain games. You can be a boy, a girl, a god, an animal. You can be anything or anyone. And so there is that aspect of having that, if you don't like yourself, you can create a character that you do like. And then the anonymity of it, really allows people to feel like they can speak more freely and be more, of their authentic selves. Intellectual stimulation, challenge, a sense of accomplishment. We've discussed all of this, but games are incredibly stimulating now on many levels, visually, intellectually, and it does give a lot of a sense of accomplishment subconsciously. So how do we determine an actual addiction? Because not everyone that is playing games excessively is actually, genuinely clinically addicted to video games. So these are some terms that we use to determine addiction. So it is determined the same way that we would determine a biological addiction to something. So the first one is salience. So this occurs when gaming becomes the most important activity in a person's life and dominates their thinking. Preoccupations and cognitive distortions. Cognitive distortions means developing beliefs that are not necessarily true. So that, like, if you don't play this game, you are not worthy or worth anything, or putting a lot of emphasis into a game that isn't necessarily based in reality. Feelings and behaviors, deterioration of functioning. For instance, even if the person's not actually playing, all they're doing is thinking about the next time they will be playing. Mood modification. So this refers to the emotions that people report as a result of engaging in online gaming and can be seen as a coping strategy. They experience an actual buzz or a high or a tranquilizing feeling of escape or numbing. I was kind of discussing that when, saying my own Candy Crush fixation at the beginning of the pandemic. It really did kind of give a sense of escape to turn your brain off and be like, I have to match up these 3 colors and that's what I have to do. And then, that's all I have to think about right now. So there actually is subtle mood modifications from games. Tolerance. This is the process where increasing amounts of gaming are required to achieve the former mentioned mood modifying effects. So this basically means that for someone engaged, they gradually build up a tolerance to, to the gaming, where 1 match or 1 hour might have been enough, and then you need 2 or 3 or 4 in order to feel like you are playing enough. And then actual withdrawal symptoms. So there are unpleasant feelings or states or physical effects that occur when the gaming is discontinued or suddenly reduced. So you can have some, mild physical symptoms, but a lot of it is irritability, like gamer rage, sometimes people call it, or an inability to kind of deal with your emotions because you were dealing with it using games. Conflict. This refers to the conflicts between the gamer and those around them. So it can be, conflict with family and friends, or just conflicts with other activities, not doing schoolwork, not doing previously enjoyed activities, not going to work, or conflict within the individual themselves, feeling like they don't have control over their gameplay. Relapse, and that's the tendency for repeated reversions to earlier patterns of gaming. So meaning they try to stop or they try to decrease and they genuinely seem like they can't. So I'm going to skip these 2 slides because they are very clinical in nature, but what they are saying is that there are actual tests and assessments that therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists can use to determine addiction. So it's not, just, a conversation being like, I feel like you meet these criteria. There are actual assessments that can be done. Okay, so gaming addiction versus just excessive gameplay. So what are the negative consequences to excessive gaming? And kind of what we mentioned before, excessive gaming is definitely, it is definitely an issue, but it does not necessarily mean you are addicted. You would have to fall into a couple of those categories that we previously mentioned. However, excessive gameplay is a huge issue among people right now, and there are negative consequences to it, even if it does not, qualify as an actual addiction. So a decrease in limbic resonance, so the capacity to develop and feel empathy. So this is something that we are seeing from kids that are starting to play excessively from a young age. And we don't have a lot of data about it because, we need data over time. But if you are on technology, playing games from a very, very young age, you're developing your socialization a lot from games, and games look incredibly realistic right now, but they are not completely realistic. They're still AI. And so you are, there is some data to suggest that it does impact your ability to understand and feel emotions effectively for your age group. effective communication of thoughts, feelings, and needs, learning to read social cues, which is what I was just talking about. They start learning to read social cues from games, which is not the same as socializing in real life. Ability to self-soothe is a big one I like to point out. So what that means is if the only way that someone can calm themselves down is by using a game, they're losing their ability to calm themselves down in other ways. And I tell this to my patients and the kids I work with all the time. You should never have one way of dealing with stress or one way of calming yourself down. I don't care what it is. My main way of relaxing and calming down is to watch horrible reality television, which is my guilty pleasure because I like to turn my brain off and watch that. But I shouldn't be at a point where if all my electronics were broken and I couldn't do that, that I would just completely freak out and not be able to calm down. We need to have multiple ways to self-soothe. And that's kind of how I explain it to kids, because a lot of times if you come at it in a way of games are bad, they will immediately shut down. And so I like to explain it as like, it's not necessarily the game, it's that it doesn't make sense to only have one way to relieve your stress. Aggression that can come from, excessive gameplay, the anonymity of playing online, cyberbullying, things like that. Lack of exercise, which is just from doing anything sedentary, eye, back, and tendon strain, and sleep deprivation. So sleep deprivation also can be, attributed to a lot of electronics and things like that, or streaming a show and wanting to watch the next episode. But it's just this idea that if we are excessively doing anything and we're willing to give up like sleep and biological needs for it, it definitely leads to negative consequences. So excessive gaming and COVID. So this is a slide that I recently added to this presentation this year because of COVID. So in a 2020 year review, so 55% of people picked up video games, meaning they took data from people that report that they previously did not really play games. And there's been a huge uptick of people starting to play games. And many video game companies are using social distancing to advertise. So what I have on the left of the screen is actually an advertisement, play a part together. So because the need to social distance and quarantine, a lot of video game companies are taking advantage of that and using that as a as a way to advertise. However, there is a lot of truth in it. With COVID, video games are providing an outlet that kids have not had in the past, which is the ability to continue to talk to each other and to do something online and to have a sense of community without actually leaving your house, which is not a bad thing. But like with anything, as parents, we need to be able to have the boundaries of how often you should play and the games that you're playing and who you're playing with and who you're talking to. Kids should, there should be that they're only talking to other people that they know in real life and playing games, not necessarily just playing with people that they randomly meet on the internet that could necessarily not be completely safe. And so there are a lot of risky factors with this, but it also provides a lot of structure and an outlet to kids that throughout the pandemic they would not have without video games. And so I also wrote here COVID context in video game play. And so what I mean by that is that the amount of video game time and the amount of technology time in general is clearly increasing. Because we're on technology for school and for work. And then kids are not, that is not relaxation time for them. So I do understand not wanting, your child to be on technology all day long, but to them, it is different to be on technology for school and then to play a video game to relax. And so, COVID is really providing a different context for what we define as excessive. And I think it is really all about context. So what I would say would be excessive, in a time when there isn't COVID, I think I'd be more flexible with that now that there is COVID. So what we consider to be too much or to be, potentially addicted to something really the context matters. So if we have two kids that are both playing 4 hours of video games a day, but one kid is not going to school or not doing their work or not doing what they need to do, and one kid is handling everything, and that's just how they spend their free time. The context is very different, even though it's the same amount of playtime. And that's really important in distinguishing if the gaming is excessive. Because right now we have way more time at home to be doing these things. And so if it's not infringing on other areas of our lives, I think it needs to be looked at a little bit differently within the context of COVID, if that makes sense. Gaming addiction and gambling. So this is something I like to touch on because not a lot of people really realize it. So in games, there's something called microtransactions. Microtransactions in games allow players to spend real currency in order to obtain additional content, such as power-ups, new character costumes, and the ability to clear levels with minimal effort. That was one of the things that led to my Candy Crush downfall, because as these transactions are found in many games, and most commonly mobile games that are initially free to play, which Candy Crush is. And then as things get harder, they're like, oh, this is really hard, but if you just spend 99 cents, you can beat it. And I'm like, well, that's not a lot of money. But then it's 99 cents, 99 cents. And then there's algorithms that will tell the game like, oh, this person is willing to spend real world currency. And then they'll get better offers or more expensive offers. And so it kind of builds on that. I like to make this known to parents, because the way a lot of games work is, especially mobile games, are linked to your Google account. So if your credit card is linked to your Google account and your child is linked to your Google account, they don't need to have your credit card information. They can just click buy. And so I've had a lot of parents be like, I have all of these charges and I don't know where they're from, because they don't realize that the accounts link up, and that, in game, a kid can just buy something. So an easy way to deal with that is to unlink your card to your Google account, or if you have your kid's Google account linked to yours, to unlink the card from theirs. But so these transactions are very predatory. Kids, there's certain prowess and status from having character costumes and things like that in games, especially games like Fortnite and stuff. They're called new skins, and it shows that because you can also earn these things through hours and hours and hours of play time, there's status associated with them. So you can play 40 hours and earn this new skin, or you can just buy it and you would still have the same amount of prestige from having it. In 2017, the game company Blizzard reports it made more than $4 billion in microtransactions alone. So meaning not in selling their games, just in people buying things in the game that they already bought. They made $4 billion. Loot boxes are similar, but a little bit different. So I do like to point out the difference between them. So loot boxes are in-game reward systems that can be purchased with real currency and provide a randomized reward. So microtransactions, what I was just talking about, that's like if I was playing a level of Candy Crush and they were like, you need this hammer to move forward. And I was like, all right, I'm going to buy the hammer. I know exactly what I'm buying and I'm moving forward in the level. A loot box is where you can spend $2 on a box and you might get something amazing, and you might get something terrible, and most of the time you get something terrible. They've been psychologically related to slot machines, low risk of reward and no skill required. So there are a lot of games that have real-time events where it's like, okay, you have a better chance of getting something amazing. And, not just kids, adults as well are like, okay, well, I've got a better chance, so why not spend the $2? I might get something that's worth much more than that if I was to buy it outright. Loot boxes have been outlawed in certain countries as it's been determined as it's a legal form of predatory gambling for minors. That it does not currently meet the US standard of definition of gambling. So meaning in our country, you are allowed to do this in games, and almost all games do this. But other countries are recognizing that it's very predatory because a lot of adults can handle gambling, and so kids should not be able to. And it's also, they don't see it that way because it's not presented that way, but that's what it essentially is. And then there are websites for resale of things that you get in that. So if you spend $2 on a box, get something that's worth $20, you could go on a website and resell it for $20 and make a profit. And so a lot of people are convinced that they might be able to make a profit that way. which very rarely works out because it is a randomized reward and there's a very low chance of getting something amazing, as with regular gambling. Gaming addiction and the brain. So there's a chart on here that shows a 2-week trial of taking young adult males from ages 18 to 21. And so they had a control group and a group that played violent video games for several hours a day for 2 weeks. And so the brain scans are showing atrophy of the gray matter in the frontal lobe, so impulse control and empathy, and reduced cortical thickness, so possible cognitive impairments. Once they stopped playing, the brain scans returned to normal levels of functioning. This was, it should be noted, excessive gameplay every day for 2 weeks, and the game was very violent. But it is showing that excessive playing of very violent video games can it does have actual changes in your brain chemistry. This slide is very not, so this is a chart from the American Academy of Pediatrics, what they would normally in a non-COVID situation recommend for your age and how much they should be able to do certain technological things like TV, non-violent games, violent games, online games, things like that. In a non-COVID world, this is an extremely conservative estimate. I did not write this, it's just from the American Academy of Pediatrics, and I don't think that it's actually that feasible for, our current culture that idealizes these digital games. However, this isn't even taking into account COVID. So, I don't think the slide is very relevant for right now, but it is interesting to look at, because with COVID, we're spending way more time just on devices to, in school. And so it's not really that relevant for our current climate. So frequent co-occurring disorders. So what that means is if there is genuine video game addiction, there's usually something else going on. So autism spectrum disorder, ADD or ADHD, depression, anxiety, other addictions, PTSD. So there's usually some mental health issues going on with video game addiction, and the video game addiction is helping to cope and relieve with that in some way. And so that's why, technically some places, some states and do not currently recognize video game addiction, but you can still get counseling for it because there's usually another thing going on with it, and it can be reimbursed by insurance. So this is a quote. A Harris poll surveyed a randomly selected sample of American youth ages 8 to 18. About 8% of video game players exhibited pathological patterns of play. And so pathological gamers spend twice as much time playing as non-pathological gamers, receive poorer grades in school, and also showed comorbidity with attention problems, ADD and ADHD and things like that. That makes a lot of sense, and it's not saying that video gaming is causing ADD, ADHD, or autism or anything like that. It's just saying that they go together, because if a kid is struggling with ADHD, a game can help stimulate them in a way that keeps their brain engaged. Positives of video games, because I do think that there are a lot of positives of gaming as well. Increased motor control, intellectual stimulation, and possible pro-social behaviors, meaning, there can be a lot of positive socializing as well. The rise of multiplayer experiences online have given way to a new form of socializing in which players work together to solve problems. It can be the catalyst for friends to gather in person as well, in a non-COVID situation. So there are a lot of positives to gaming, and there are a lot of different games. And so a game like Minecraft, which is very popular with kids, actually has a lot of pro-social behaviors. The music is soothing, it's not violent, it is very intellectually stimulating, it's problem solving, there's leadership skills you can learn in it, and there are games like that. And then there are also games that can be more violent and more aggressive and can also, promote not pro-social behaviors. And so it's important to understand and know what your child is playing. So what is contributing to this epidemic? So there's societal contribution. So there's a lack of official recognition that video game addiction can even be real. And so that leads to kind of a lack of people that can help treat it and a lack of information out there. Pressure from industries so that make money from those addicted to various aspects. So gaming companies are genuinely trying to get people addicted to their games. It's how they make money. And so we talked about some of the ways that they do this. And so these industries are huge billion-dollar industries. Loss of family time, to overworked families, current single parents, things like that. Lack of a mental health system with people who understand how to treat this, and a culture that idealizes all things digital, meaning that video games are very much a part of our culture, and they're not going away. The video game industry is more popular than the television industry right now. And so it is part of our culture. And so, we need to kind of adapt to it instead of pushing against it and being like, this is something that people will grow out of. Challenges for therapists, there's a lack of training in it and a lack of resources. There's no 12-step programs for this right now. And then our own societal norms. We're immersed in our culture's attitudes about digital media. We're users of it, and we might think it's, extremely beneficial, and it can be in certain aspects. So treatment for excessive gaming or video game addiction. The first thing I always say to families that I work with is to become familiar with the culture in order to validate it. If a child knows that you hate video games and you're very vocal about that, they're not going to listen to you because they're going to assume that you don't understand. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't, and so they're going to immediately shut down. And so, I find I don't play every video game out there, but I do, if a game is popular, at least research it. I haven't actually played Among Us, but I do know a lot about it and how it works and can talk to kids about it because it's so popular. So if you are familiar with the culture, the kids will automatically be a little bit less defensive. It's also important to understand the way the games that they're playing work. So this is a tip I've given to families a lot that have helped. If you're playing a game like Fortnite, and you say you have 1 hour of playtime, that does not work within the confines of the game. So I'm not saying let them play forever. Instead of saying 1 hour of game time, you have one match. A match in Fortnite is anywhere from like a half hour to 45 minutes. And so that allows the kids to understand a little bit more, because if they shut it off in the middle of the game, they lose their progress, they lose what they feel like they've been working towards for the past half hour. There's no pause button, there's no save, and it induces that extreme rage and irritability. But if you say, you are allowed one match, it is within the confines of the time you were going to give them, and it allows them to feel like they completed what they were working on. So familiarizing yourself with the game and certain language really does stop a lot of initial arguments about gameplay. Behavioral interventions, just the way that you would limit, any kid from doing anything excessive, giving certain boundaries, certain things they can and cannot do. Like I said, in COVID, this is providing a huge outlet for kids. So I would, encourage them to, if they are playing with people online, a lot of kids use something called Discord, and you can see who they're talking to. So if you have young kids, verify who these kids are. You look at look at who they're talking to, and be like, if you don't know them in real life, you cannot be friends with them on Discord, and check into that. Play the games with your kids every once in a while, like just the way that you would watch a TV show that they're interested in, or look it up to understand what they're talking about. Just so you are able to more fully understand what they are doing. There are, inpatient facilities for people that are extremely, extremely addicted to video games, where they actually take away all technology and start you, from the beginning, but that is not currently covered by insurance, and it is a very extreme option. Outpatient counseling, seeing a therapist once a week can help, identify what else is going on besides the excessive gaming, because I guarantee if there's a really excessive gameplay happening, there's something else going on that they are supplementing using the gaming. And then there are clinical trials of medication for video game addiction, where it actually, you know, blocks the receptors where you get certain psychological rewards in your brain, but that is still in clinical trials. And so we don't have a lot of information on that right now. Okay. So I am going to stop sharing my screen, and then we can take questions or comments. So
yeah,
Abby.
I started to make a list of them. Some of them are condensed a little bit. But the first one, and this was early on, you kind of answered it, but I think it'll be good just to go over it again. Should I only be worried about gaming or time spent on gadgets overall? It's difficult to limit given the current situation.
Yes. So this, you know, presentation is specifically about gaming, but a lot of it is, a lot of the concerns will translate to overuse of social media and things like that. I would say to be mindful of the gadget use overall, but to really think about the context and to understand that being on a screen for 4 or 5 hours for school does not equate to relaxation and fun for a kid. So maybe, you know, encourage them to change the devices. So if they were on their MacBook for school all day, you know, I think it's okay for them to then be on their phone to do a mobile game or to be on a console or something, to change up the device, take breaks in between, be like, okay, you know, we're going to do something non-screen related, and then you can have your screen time. So I think a lot of what happens in the breakdown of communication is, you know, kids just taking it as like no and not really understanding why. So I think if you're, you know, if you say like, I'm worried about the excessive screen time, but I do recognize school was not relaxing for you, to explain that and be like, let's do something else, and then we can have, you know, depending on, you know, a certain time, certain match limit, things like that, to help them understand why you're limiting. But definitely take into account the context and the benefits of them socializing with people and when setting those limits.
Thank you. And the next one kind of goes with it. You brought up the slide, American Pediatrics, and the given kind of timeline, which is conservative to begin with. But someone was saying, is there one for a version for in COVID times? I don't believe there is.
I don't believe there is. And I know it feels like we've been in COVID forever, and it has been a very long time, but you know, professionals are still, everyone is grappling with this, and was so unexpected, and there's no long-term data, and it's really, you know, everyone is doing the best they can to adjust to it. And so there really isn't one for COVID time. So I do apologize for not having that information, but as with everything in COVID, we're just trying to get a handle on it, really.
And I think as like more information comes out, you'll update this presentation as you always do with more information.
I would add it. I would add it immediately. I was like 10 minutes before presenting, like, is there anything new?
Right.
But it's hard because we don't have long-term data on certain things. And it is hard to limit it with, you know, needing, technology has been amazing in this pandemic. Kids can go to school and not socialize. Kids can, you know, and not have to be in person. It's provided, I do all my therapy telehealth for my outpatient kids. So kids can come to therapy without having to risk being in person. But there are a lot of downfalls that we just don't really have a lot of information about right now.
All right. And then I know your presentation isn't about like blocking video games altogether, but one question is there an easy way to block these sites?
It's going to be different for every site. So it's your best bet would be, you know, what are you looking to block an online game? Is it to Google more information? There are a lot of, you know, if you Google how do I block this, there are a lot of parent friendly steps that take you step by step, but it's going to be different there are so many different avenues. So like, it's not one way anymore. There are games on your phone, games online, games on the physical Xbox or whatever you have, PlayStation, you know, games on your MacBook, games that are used for math in school. There are just so many. So you would have to look into each individual one. But for the most part, there are a lot of very easy step-by-step instructions on how to do that for when you Google specifically what you're looking to do.
All right. Sorry, more questions are coming in.
Okay.
This one is just more like a opinion question for you. What do you think of gaming as a profession, and more specifically like Fortnite?
Oh, like as people that make it their profession?
Yes.
I
I think it's more of an opinion piece. Like there's
part
not.
of me thinks it's super cool that that's even possible. But you know, I see a lot of kids that think they're going to become professional players, or professional streamers is actually what more people think they're going to do, because what we, you know, streaming was what we talked about before, people watching other people play, and anyone that has ever made their friends laugh think that they can do that. I mean, I actually have a like a channel that my husband and I just do for fun. No one watches us. But it's like it's something anyone can try to do, and they think they might get famous from it. And so I do try to find very nice ways of being like, let's have backup career goals and aspirations, because it's actually very, very difficult to do that. But as with any kind of celebrity or things like that, kids see other people do it and they're like, oh, I can do that. I play video games. I'm funny. I can make millions of dollars doing that. And the drive to be a professional game player in like Fortnite and stuff like that really does add to a lot of the conflict and pressure that kids put on themselves, because they do see it as a viable career path. So I would keep that in mind, that to them, it's not necessarily just a game. They're thinking of investing in their future. So while I'm not saying that that is a good investment to do, I would just keep in mind that that's the pressure they're putting on themselves for it.
Awesome, thank you. This is specific to kind of Discord. So this parent isn't necessarily worried about them in terms of like games, but chatting a lot on Discord. He seems distracted from class. They try to do parental controls. He finds ways to like evade. It seems like most of his communication now is with people he will never come face to face with. Is this a similar pattern that you're seeing nowadays?
Yes, so I'm seeing that on a lot, not just video games. There's things on, you know, Snapchat too and stuff like that. Kids meeting kids that they're never going to actually meet in person. Discord is hugely popular, and there are like Discord servers that I guess might be equated to old school chat rooms, where it's like, okay, this is a server for people that like Fortnite. And so that provides such a sense of community for kids, but it also is really difficult to regulate who you're talking to on it. And so I know it's extremely difficult, and it's absolutely a pattern that I am seeing. And so I would talk about just safe internet practices in general with your kid. Like, you know, if you're talking about this game and you're relegating it to Discord, you know, never give out personal information, your personal phone number. The good thing about Discord is that it is like, it doesn't take into account your personal information. So if you're talking to someone on Discord, they don't know your phone number, they don't know your address, they don't know anything like that. And so, you know, safe internet practices all around, especially as this becomes the main way we're socializing, is an ongoing conversation to have with your kids.
All right, and this one is about Fortnite. So they were seeing a change in behavior with their son. And so they kind of had to eliminate Fortnite altogether, which eliminated time that he was talking to his friends. They feel that he doesn't understand their decision to do that, but he feels like they took away his only communication at this time. Is there a way to help him understand their decision?
So I would definitely, you know, I'm sure you already have, but I would explain in detail why you're having the decision, why you're making that decision, and maybe give them a way to like, to discuss. We can talk about earning back like one match a night or something like that. If you can show that you can get everything else done, that you can start the game and end the game without having, you know, a meltdown. I see that a lot in the private kids that I treat for things like this, especially with Fortnite, that, you know, it gets taken away and then they have to try to earn it back, and then they have a meltdown and you're like, this is why. And it gives actual, you know, practical evidence. And so I would definitely go into detail explaining your decision, and to kind of be like, this is what we're worried about, this is what we need to see in order for you to be able to handle it responsibly, and then give them a chance to earn it back by doing, you know, one match a night. We're going to watch you, or we're going to, you know, I know that a match does not take longer than 45 minutes, and that's what you're going to be, you know, and if they end up having a meltdown, being like, and this is why we need to eliminate it again, to show them, you know, practical evidence-based reasons for the boundaries.
All right, thank you. How much is excessive gaming in terms of hours spent playing? Like, is there an actual number that qualifies it?
There is no actual number, and especially not in COVID.
Right.
It's excessive is really more considered in the factors of how you're functioning in the other areas of your life. So excessive is very relative. So you can, it's, you know, it also, I'm not here to tell anyone how to parent. So it is also, you know, relative to your own home and your own lifestyle and your own boundaries. But I think in terms clinically, it really is more about if it's impacting the other areas. Are you getting your schoolwork done? Are you getting chores done? Is it the only thing you're doing? I tell people, parents especially, to look at it in terms of television. How much television are you watching at night? Are you watching 2 hours of TV, which is what I'm watching? Is that excessive to you or not? So if you take it and put it on something else, and that's your relaxation time, I think that helps understand a little bit more. You know, it is still technology and it is how a kid relaxes. So in my own opinion, if a kid is functioning really well in every other area, I would say an hour or two a night is not that excessive, you know, but that is depending on them getting everything done, being able to go to bed on time. Sometimes playing video games right before bed, they're too stimulated to fall asleep right away. So it really depends on their functioning in other areas and their ability to handle not being able to play. If they have meltdowns when they can't play, they're not handling it well. And like I said before, I would use that as evidence that they're not handling it well.
I combined 2 Minecraft questions. So one parent said, we try to limit to a half an hour or an hour. My kid doesn't seem to be happy with that. And then the question is, can we place a limit on Minecraft? What's kind of an equivalent to a match on Fortnite? Is there a way to say something in Minecraft terms?
Oh, I'm thinking, sorry. I don't think that there is that kind of equivalent. Yeah, I don't, as far
because there's no like start and stop.
There's no start and end time.
Yeah.
So like, whereas Fortnite is, the thing with Fortnite is you're playing with other people online and you're playing specific matches. So with Minecraft, there is no start and end time. So it does, you know, giving an actual time limit is fine in terms of the language used. Like, as I said before, Minecraft is a very positive game. However, you know, with all children, there needs to be boundaries and limitations. And so I'm thinking an hour of Minecraft a night is appropriate, especially, you know, if the kid is younger. And so I also am a big proponent of using video game time as rewarding for doing other things. So maybe having the option of earning more time if they achieve, you know, in other areas, do more chores, things like that. So I use that behaviorally with a lot of kids as well. And I make fun little charts and stickers that they earn, you know, specific time.
Awesome. We do have questions coming up and questions still rolling in. So if we don't get to all of them, we can also type up answers and post them in response as well. But one of them is about the clinical trials that you're presenting. They said it's really cool. How do I learn more about that? And then what is your thought on, I'm not familiar with this, so I might say this incorrectly, Achille Interactive's new product, Endeavor RX, the first and only prescription treatment delivered through a video game.
Mm-hmm.
What is your thought?
I'm probably as familiar with it as the person that asked that question. I do know what it is. And there is there's not a lot of information on it. I think it's a very interesting concept. So it's treating like certain like ADHD and stuff like that through video games. I think it's definitely possible. There's treatment of PTSD through video games, which I sometimes talk about. And it's super interesting because there's virtual reality, which is mind-blowing, which I have, and you can use it to treat phobias and PTSD and things like that. So it is possible to treat things through video games. I do not have a lot of information on that because it is so new. And so I think we will see, stay tuned to see how effective it is. As with everything, it takes time to gather data, which is frustrating, I know. The clinical trials, so the common name is Wellbutrin, and Wellbutrin is already, it's approved as a medication for other things, but they're specifically looking at it in terms of video game addiction. So it is a medication that is available, that helps with anxiety and other aspects, and you can kind of look up Wellbutrin. And I would encourage you to kind of read, there are articles about the clinical trials used for video game addiction. So far, it's very promising. It seems to be working, but because it is still in clinical trials, I cannot definitively say it works, but it is trending that it is beneficial in curbing the biological component and addiction to it. That, again, though, that won't stop if a kid is using it to cope emotionally with other things. It would have to be in conjunction with counseling. But there are, a lot of positive trends, and there are, scholarly articles and stuff that you can look up if you Google Wellbutrin and video game trials.
All right, and I think we're just going to take one or two more questions. I have taken everyone's questions down, so we will definitely get an answer to all of them. And thanks, MK, for all of your explanations. People are very happy with it. But for someone just asked if they're going to be able to see the information. Yes, this is being recorded and it will be posted to the district's YouTube channel. So if you missed anything, everything will be up there probably in a few days.
I want to try to, I don't have this readily available, but I do want to try to make this in the upcoming weeks, kind of like a shortened tips kind of thing for parents, because I know that there's a lot of information in this presentation and not all of it is relevant to your specific kids and your specific needs. So I do want to try to create something like that, so I can talk to Dr. McDonald about that to give more concise information, because I know there's a lot here. And the PowerPoint doesn't make a ton of sense without rewatching this presentation. And it's also, this presentation is not intended for children. It's intended for adults. And so it is, I want to maybe kind of make a more condensed tip guide.
So that actually was my last question that I was going to end on. I feel like it came together nicely. Was, do you recommend watching this recording with our kids?
It's not that I don't. So but I do think it's important to understand I'm not, in my conversations today, I'm not talking to kids. If I was talking to a kid, I would probably use different terminology, things like that. So you can watch it with your kids, but I also wouldn't expect them to fully grasp everything that we're talking about. A lot of people ask if I just saw this question come in. A lot of people ask if I can put together a presentation for kids specifically. It's something that I can continue to talk to the district about, because it would look different just in the terminology and some of the information coming out and stuff like that. And a lot of this information, if you want to expand on it, you can, like I said before, Google certain things like, how do I put up parental controls on this certain game, or what's language I can use on this certain game, or look up just how the gameplay works for a certain game, so you are more aware and you can kind of develop your own language for it. So it's, yes, you can watch it with your kids, but I do caution you that it's not necessarily for kids, so they might not comprehend everything that we're talking about.
All right, I think we'll hold on questions there. Like I said, I took all of them down, so we'll get all of them answered for you. And one more just came in right now, so I will take it down.
Hey, thank you, Abby. Thank you, Mary Kate, for putting this together. Really appreciate your time and effort this evening. As we said before, we're going to get this up on our YouTube channel within the coming days. It has been recorded, so appreciate everybody coming out tonight. Be well and stay safe. Thank you.